Hey, welcome back to Man vs. Weed, the cannabis review podcast where the THC percentage is made up and the terpene profile doesn't matter. I'm your guinea pig, Tango Hotel Charlie. It's nice to have you back to smoke a joint and bullshit for a couple minutes. Just a quick refresher for those of you that are new to the podcast. My wife, she doesn't smoke cannabis. She hasn't smoked in 25 years. And I haven't not smoked cannabis in 30 years. She picks the strain from the legal market with no expectations, and I expect it to suck. So far, I haven't been wrong. We try to get 1 gram samples because you should be able to inspect the cannabis before you buy it in bulk. I typically would never buy less than an ounce because I'm a daily cannabis user, but I wouldn't buy an ounce without being able to see it or smell it and sometimes even sample it. However, none of these things are even permitted in the legal market, and that is just one of the many problems with it. So while we plan to operate using these parameters, there has not been a great selection at the 1 gram level. At some point we may run out of 1 gram samples because these LPs are just putting less and less of them out there. This is a perfect example of price gating legalization. If you can't afford to pay the high prices for low quality cannabis, then you're forced to go to the black market. If you buy black market cannabis, then you could be charged with possession of illicit cannabis. Good quality cannabis shouldn't be available to only those with the money to afford the exorbitant prices. So there should be a variety of choice at all price points and volumes. However, my wife Robin was locked into only one option, and that option was Sunset by Leafs by Snoop, by Tweed, by Canopy Growth. Ugh. Leafs by Snoop is another Tweed brand in the Canopy Growth shell game. See, Tweed has some of the worst quality weed in the legal regime, despite having more privilege than anyone else. From big alcohol money to insider support from cops and politicians, these folks had all the advantage not afforded anyone else, and still couldn't stop hemorrhaging money. Land grabs, greenhouses, master growers, once great cannabis lawyers, and they thought they had it all in the bag. But all they had in the bag was dusty, dried ditchweed that you would never buy. Another tactic they use is celebrity endorsement. Turns out being owned by one of the largest alcohol marketers in the USA has some benefits. And one of those benefits are cash injections when you can't sell your bad weed. And that cash buys names. Some of those names include breeders like DNA Genetics, as discussed on the last podcast, and some of those names are celebrities like Drake, Seth Rogen, Martha fucking Stewart, and Snoop Doggy Dogg. That's right, everyone wants to cash in on cannabis at your expense. Snoop was one of the first names they bought. Back then, they thought he would be able to endorse their shitty weed, but the Canadian government was like, nah. One of the many ridiculous rules in the Canadian Fake Legalization Act is that it prohibits celebrities from endorsing cannabis products. So Tweed, being the sneaky fucks they are, decided to just use celebrities to brand their shitty weed. So they called it Leafs by Snoop, thinking, hey, it's got the celebrity endorsement built right into the name. But again, the Canadian government was like, nah. So they tried again. This time they called it LBS, short for larfy bullshit or leaky bowel syndrome. Anyway, it's a terrible if not accurate name because nobody wants to smoke Leafs by Snoop or by anybody else. We smoke flower, not leaf. If someone tries to sell you Leafs, get your money back immediately and mock them relentlessly to anyone who will listen. So yeah, they dumped a shit ton of cash into branding because we all know that's what makes good quality cannabis, right? Except the Maple Leafs were like, nah, because it turns out that the art direction was a total ripoff of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they sued them for jacking their whole shit. It turns out Canopy Growth was trying to be slick again by creating a name and logo that just happened to look a lot like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Specifically, the same stylized, wide-shaped leaf with the words Leafs in a similar white font. A word the organization has had trademarked for 90 years. They knew exactly what they were doing. So I like to take a look at what info the website can provide, and apparently this weed is spooned and groomed just like they do in California, whatever that means. It then goes on to speak in some sort of marketing jargon that I can only best describe as black scent, which is at best cringy and at worst offensive. But go have a look at their website yourself, it's ridiculous. However, it doesn't provide you with any sort of pertinent information. Just a bunch of marketing nerd bullshit to sell bad weed. Some of you might not think this is important, and that's the problem. You should want to know where the weed you're consuming comes from, and who your dollars are supporting. Moving on, I go take a look at what information they can provide about the cannabis itself, what its lineage is, and what its cannabinoid percentages were tested at using gas chromatography, and what pesticides and other contaminants were found in the cannabis, whether it was approved by Health Canada or not. I'm not coming to find out if it will help me take a bath or go windsailing, but here's the info they do provide. Apparently it's an indica strain with dark green color and terpenes that give off an alluring scent, with extra spice and spades. It says it has a greater THC than CBD content, and that's it. It's completely worthless. Other than that, there's not much there than pictures of jars. Speaking of jars, for all the money spent on names and logos and marketing packages, what does the consumer get? You guessed it, a plain white, nondescript plastic jar with Reefer Madness messaging written all over it. This particular package of 1 gram of flour had a warning hilariously enough that told me it might take up to 4 hours to feel the effects of eating it, and that if I eat more in that 4 hours, I might need medical attention. 1 gram of dried flour. Okay, I'm not exactly sure who this warning is trying to scare, but you shouldn't troll the elderly. So yeah, just like the DNA in the last episode, it's the largest jar I've had yet. Just a big, bulky, plastic white jar with your weed bouncing around inside of it. These don't seem to have a safety seal on the inside, so you gotta be on your toes for terp ghosts. I crack it open, ready to catch a terp, but there's nothing. If you jam your nose in the jar, you catch a faint hint of something. A chemical smell. Almost like a cologne. It was really strange, and I was struggling to try and describe it to you. So I passed it around the room to see what anybody else could describe it as, and only received perplexed looks and vague analysis, which was actually pretty on brand. But the best we could come up with was a cologne. I'm going to assume that was the alluring scent that they described on the website. But again, super faint. A smell that you practically have to jam the bud up your nose to detect. But it smelled like something applied to the cannabis rather than cannabis itself because it was very strange. It didn't smell like weed. And that might sound crazy, but at this point, nothing would surprise me. The buds are light green and brown popcorn buds, not the dark green they described on the website. It's exactly the disappointment you expect from a $10 plus tax gram of weed. But if you listen to the shills, if you don't pay enough, you deserve trash weed. Once again, I must be extremely unlucky because this gram is exactly as dry as every other sample I've tried yet. I'm always told that I just got a bad one or I have bad luck over and over until I begin to suspect that they're all bad ones. And the reviewers are full of shit. I read some of these reviews and they regurgitate the same things you see written by a marketing team with no negative feedback about the quality of the weed. One guy even said it was crisp and crumbled in his fingertips as though that's a good thing. I digress. Mine, on top of being as dry as a mouthful of cinnamon, also had big chunks of stem and leaf still attached. I guess that's the Leafs by Snoop California way. So I put it in my fingers and it crunched into dust, sounding like crunched up beneficial bug bodies. I took a video if you were a fan of dick kicks on America's Funniest Home Videos. You can find that on the Man vs. Weed hashtag. So I crushed it into dust that left no stickiness or residue on my fingers. Some of the best weed I ever had was a hash plant that stuck to your fingers like Play-Doh. This was the opposite of that. Once again, it was only packaged in January of this year and should be their best possible offering. I've been accused of being dishonest about reviews or creating a narrative, and I find that offensive. I'm simply putting my money where my mouth is and reporting the findings. I actually fear that by saying the same thing over and over again every week, you're going to get bored. But honestly, I don't have a choice. There's not much to say. The weed's just not that good. And I promise you, if I find something good, I'll let you know. I'm literally paying to make this podcast. I get nothing from being dishonest. If anything, my honesty seems to piss some of you off. So I guess there's that. Oh, I almost forgot the microscope. Under the microscope is the same horror show that was the last tweed sample. It is really bizarre and hard to describe. Normally I'll tell you how many ambers and cloudy trichomes I see, but here there was so few that I couldn't even tell you that. Scraggly stalks with no heads, and everything looks chunky or melty. I showed my wife, and she described it as looking like phlegm spit on a wad of hair. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound good to me. As is custom, I put it into a raw organic paper with a glass tip, and again it was barely enough to even fill the paper. On top of that, it was like fine beach sand. Trying to roll it up was a fun challenge as it poured out of the tip like sand in an egg timer. After that frustrating task, I was more than ready to smoke a joint, because this was the first smoke of the day. For this sample, I did a wake and bake. As I'm sure you know, that's the first smoke of the day. And often that hits the hardest. I figured that would be a good test on a blank canvas, so to speak. It lit okay, and it tasted better than I expected. That isn't to say it was good, just not bad. Meaning it wasn't bitter and nasty tasting, but it also wasn't amazing either. But there just wasn't an amazing taste I need you to know about. It was just meh. If you want to take that as a win, okay. I know I sound like a broken record, but radiation kills terps. And terps are important. Cannabinoids work together in an entourage effect. That's why synthetic THC doesn't work. That's why a quarterback doesn't win a game alone. He needs a whole team. Anyways, it burned okay, like I said. However, the ash was that dark, dingy gray-black color, indicating sloppy growing, drying, curing techniques. The usual corners cut by LPs. The high was very disappointing, very low grade and mild. I had a headache that morning, and the cannabis did absolutely nothing for it. As with most of the legal offerings, the mild high was very short-lived, maybe 40 minutes. Certainly not the 4 hours the big scary warning on the package told me about. There are people that tell me you have to buy higher quantities to get the good stuff. I'm told that I'm unlucky. If I just spend more money, I would find the good weed. So was I lucky today? Did I spend enough money to turn my bad luck around? Did I pay the cost to be the boss? Nope. I just got fucked doggy style. Thanks for tuning in again, folks. If you would like to question my integrity, make sure to follow me at StreetVillain on Twitter. And if you have any good questions, you can email me at manversusweedthc@gmail.com. Make sure you tell a friend and like, review, and subscribe if you like what I do. If not, go fuck yourself. So until next time, get high as fuck and free the motherfucking weed.